In this video, I'm going to continue our discussion around the Paladin class, and in this particular case, we'll be creating a human paladin using the Noble Knight background. As such, I will once again be using the character wizard to create this particular character, and you can access that simply by clicking on the PC's button here in the top right corner, and clicking on this star icon that is here in the character selection screen. If you just loaded Fantasy Grounds, then your character selection screen should load by default if you are a player, not as a dungeon master. So you may not even have to click on the PC's button to open this up. You just wait for Fantasy Grounds to finish loading, and then you click on the actual star to open up the character wizard that you see in the background here. So as I said, I'm taking human, and in this case, I've already got common, but I get to choose another language, and I will take Celestial. It's a little bit of an odd language for a noble knight to know, and it might be a little bit hard to explain, but for the purposes of this video, I just need a language, so I'm not going to be making use of it. A paladin's primary stat is going to be strength, but wisdom is going to be a close second, and charisma is probably going to be on par with wisdom as the two. As a paladin, you're supposed to be charismatic and be able to lead people into situations they might not otherwise want to go. And as a result of that, charisma would give you benefits to that particular aspect of things. At the same time, wisdom is going to tie right into your casting capabilities, your spell casting capabilities, as well as anything that you will be doing from a healing perspective. So you're going to want to essentially focus on trying to get as high as possible for those three particular stats. And don't forget your constitution. You, as a paladin, you're going to be on the front lines. That means you need to be able to soak up a lot of damage in order for the rest of the party to be able to get at you, to be able to potentially heal you outside of what you can't heal yourself, and be able to essentially keep you alive longer. So those are the kinds of things that you'll want to consider. With that in mind, I generally like to go with the dice roll option, because with Fantasy Grounds and with 5th edition in general, you tend to get a better average or a better let's call it disparity between the dice. So you could theoretically roll 3 18s or 6 18s for that matter, but that is on the extreme end of it. At the same time, you could theoretically roll 6 1s. I don't think anyone's going to allow anyone to create a character with 6 1s, but it could be interesting to watch. But essentially, you have a much wider spectrum of chances to be able to get good dice rolls. So I'm going to roll some dice here and come up with some numbers that I want to be able to use for this particular character. And to do that is very easy. You'll see here that I've clicked on this standard array drop-down box and have exposed the dice roll option here. All I have to do is click that. That is actually not bad. I've already got a 17 and a 15 and a 16 right off the start. I'm not a fan of the 6, but I'm not necessarily going to say no to it, and I've got a 10 and a 12. And keeping in mind, because I'm going with the human variant here, or the human race, all of these numbers are going to automatically be increased by 1 point. So I will stick with this particular character. I will, however, move the 6 over to intelligence. I will keep wisdom there. And I'll leave everything else as it is, except I'll move the 17 over to there, and I will put the 16 on the wisdom. And what this will end up giving me is an 18 in strength, an 11 in dexterity, a 16 in constitution, a 7 in intelligence, a 17 in wisdom, and a 13 in charisma, and you can see those numbers over here. And that's because the human race gets a 1 to all of the stats. Okay, so my stats are set. The next thing we want to look at doing is actually selecting our class. And in this case, I want a paladin. And before I choose these skill proficiencies, and I get to choose 2 of them, I want to make sure that I look at the background and look at the skill proficiencies that I'm acquiring there, because I don't want to double up on these particular proficiencies. Now I'm gaining the persuasion proficiency as well as the history proficiency through my background. Only persuasion shows up in this particular selection, but you'll see that there's a very significantly reduced selection of skill proficiencies that we could choose from previous classes that we've looked at. And in this case, I'm going to go with medicine and religion. Okay. Now the last thing that we have to do from a race, class, and background selection is to choose the actual background. So I'm going to click on this button here. I could just hit the next option here. And I'm going to go with Noble Knight. And that's going to give me a tool proficiency here. And I'm going to go with a dragon chess set for now, just for something a little bit different from what I've done in the past. I also still get to choose an additional language. And I've already selected Celestial. So in this particular case, I'm going to choose Elven, or Elvish. Not entirely certain why yet, to be honest, but when it comes to my videos, language doesn't seem to be a key factor. Now, there are a couple of options that we could do right now. We could simply give this particular character a name, and then hit the save button, and it will go through and create the character sheet. Or we can go to the inventory and fill in all of the items that we, as a paladin and as a noble knight, can actually select. And I'm just going to quickly check. No, we don't gain any spells at this particular point in time. So the inventory is literally the last step that we have to deal with. To look for the inventory, you just go to your class sheet and scroll down past the tables here until you get to the equipment section here. And you will see that this will give you an idea as to what your starting equipment is. And this is, of course, if you're choosing that particular option. A Dungeon Master might just decide to give you the starting gold, which I actually can't think of right off the top of my head as to what that is, or the background. It's an option that you get to choose. But if you just start with a starting gold, you then have to go buy your equipment. So I generally like to allow my characters to start with their equipment because it means that we're getting into the campaign quicker than simply having to all of a sudden roleplay a shopping scenario inside of town. But, I mean, either one, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. In this particular case, I'm just going to take the equipment here that I want to choose and drop it into place. So, of the two options here, I'm going to decide on the martial weapon and shield option. And I want shield first. And that's because in my mind, and it's going to be unique to every individual, in my mind, a paladin is someone who carries a weapon and a shield, not necessarily someone who is dual-wielding. And that comes down to the quest for the Holy Avenger. Once you get your Holy Avenger, if you do get one, chances are you're not going to be wielding any other weapon, so you're going to have a free hand, which means that you can make use of a shield. At the same time, you're not going to find two Holy Avenger weapons unless you take one off of another paladin who has died, and then you have to attune to it before you can actually really use it. So the odds of you actually having two Holy Avenger weapons is extremely rare, and even the odds of getting your actual Holy Avenger weapon is still considered rare. So a better option in this case is to go with this. Now, it doesn't mean you can't change later on. Maybe you do lock in and all of a sudden you have two Holy Avengers. Doesn't mean you can't take a dual wielding option through the feats category there and be able to make use of both weapons. So it's entirely up to you. In this particular case, I'm going to choose a longsword and add that to the inventory. So I'm also going to look at a potentially a simple melee weapon. Now, for point of clarity here, if you're unsure what a martial weapon is versus a simple melee weapon is, what you can do is click on this weapons table here, and it will show you the categories. So simple melee weapons will be listed here, while martial weapons will be listed below. And as you can see, a longsword is classified as a martial weapon. While like a quarterstaff or a spear, the javelins, hand axe, great clubs, whatever, they're all considered simple melee weapons. In this particular case, I'm going to do something different and take 5 javelins. And what you do is you drag and drop 1 down and then simply change that number to 5. And that will allow you to have 5 javelins. All right, a priest pack or an explorer's pack. So the packs, they come from the adventuring gear. And you won't necessarily see what's in the packs here, but they do come with other stuff in it. You will see them if you expand on the particular list or the item here. So a priest pack gives you a backpack, a blanket, 10 candles, a tinder box, an alms box, 2 blocks of incense, a censer, vestments, and 2 days of rations and a water skin. Whereas an explorer's pack contains an entirely different set of gear. Now, a paladin depends on your background here as to whether a priest pack makes sense or whether an explorer's pack makes sense. In this particular case, because I have a noble knight background selected, the explorer's pack makes a little bit more sense because chances are I've been roaming around the landscapes rather than sitting in a church. So I'm going to drop this into place. And you'll notice that I was able to simply do that right from this item. It doesn't have to come from this particular table. And then the last thing is chainmail and a holy symbol. All right, so let's go over to armor and type in chainmail. So you'll notice that there's a chain shirt and chainmail. You are wanting to select the chainmail option, not the chain shirt option. And that's because there is a difference between the two of them. You will notice that this number here represents the armor class of that particular item. In this case, it's a 16 because the chainmail is assuming you have a mail shirt, you have the greaves, which I believe are your pants, and you have everything else that you have to attach to that particular chainmail suit to make up a full suit of chainmail armor. Whereas if you just take the chain shirt, that's all you're getting is the chain shirt. So you're losing 3 armor class points off of that particular object, if you will. Now, there is a difference in weight and cost. So it's a heavy item for the chainmail shirt, but it's medium armor for the chain shirt. So that's actually a difference in the type as well. And the weight is about 35 pounds in difference between the two of them, which makes a little bit more sense, although the cost doesn't seem to really change that much. But I suppose it could be argued that a chain shirt that is a medium class armor is going to be constructed a little bit more finely, therefore take more time, so the cost could be slightly more expensive as a result. In any event, that's what that works or looks like. So, what about the holy symbol? Well, the holy symbol isn't an item itself, but a category that leads you to the items you can choose from. And in this particular case, I'm going to go with an emblem because it makes a little bit more sense that that emblem will be somehow attached to or clipped onto that chainmail in some way, shape, or form so that it's always there, and all the paladin has to do is, while still having the shield on their arm, reach over and tap it on their chest to be able to make use of whatever spell they're going to cast. The shield is still on their arm. They haven't lost or changed their armor class as a result, but they are no longer holding the handle on the inside of that particular shield to keep that shield steady. That's what that comes down to. So that takes care of everything from the class sheet. The next thing we're going to want to do is take a look at the background. And under the proficiency section here, you will see a tool, you will see a languages, and then you will see your equipment. In this particular case, we need to go back to the adventuring gear table here, or continue to search for it here. And if we look for clothes, for example, clothes, we're not going to find anything under armor, but we will under gear. And we need a fine set of clothes. Noble Knight, I guess. Okay. And, okay. A signet ring. So, is there a ring somewhere? Yep, we have a signet ring available to us. A scroll of pedigree. Scroll. Now, you'll notice that there isn't a scroll of pedigree. Well, that is simply because all that really is parchment, one sheet rolled up. And then when your character sheet is created, you can change that to represent your scroll of pedigree. And you can even write a description for it if you wish. And we have a purse. Interesting. Which apparently we don't have, so I'm going to go with a pouch and add that to this. And then when we create the character sheet, we'll add the 25 gold pieces to that. All right, so we now have everything that we need in order to create this particular character. So all we have to do is hit this save button. And what should happen is it will go through and create our character sheet for us. Ah, good. They have fixed the saving proficiencies, which has been broken for a little bit, so that is awesome to see now. So we don't need to worry about fixing anything up for that, but we do need to deal with the 25 gold pieces, and that's under our inventory and below our equipment. Now, before I do anything, I'm going to put in our descriptions. And then under gold, I'm going to put 25 gold pieces. Now, anyone who is paying attention may have noticed that this list is a little bit longer than what we had in our character wizard. And that is because the pack, the Explorer's pack that we selected, more or less expanded out into all of the items that were included in that particular pack and then added them as an individual item to our equipment. So you see here that we have our backpack, and when I'm done, it will no longer be empty. I will be moving my bedroll, for example, into the backpack. That is equipped. I am wearing those as well, so that should be equipped. My emblem is going to be worn on breastplate of the chainmail. That's where it's located. The javelins, I'm not going to worry about just yet. Mess kit is going to be in the backpack. And you'll see what's happening here is that items that have another matching item that you're linking them to, so in this case the backpack, are going to get tabbed out like this. And when you click on the sheet, they will eventually get organized into an area immediately below that item that you're putting them in. And I will show you why we're going to do this. Scroll of pedigree. So I'm just updating that to reflect that change. And where was I? So these will be in the backpack. This will be on the belt. Backpack. Finger. Left finger. And whenever there's a ring in play, I always ask players to tell me what finger it's on. And the reason being is that during the critical fails and critical hit scenarios, it's possible to actually potentially trigger a scenario where a piece of your body takes damage. And it could be that a hand gets cut off, and if it's your left hand, well, there goes your signet ring. If it's your finger that is lost, then I roll a 1d5 minus 1, and that tells me what finger has been cut off. Or in the case of a finger, it would be a d4, and then there's a 50-50 chance whether your thumb gets cut off, that kind of thing. And the reason for that is because it allows for a little bit of role play. If you lose your finger during combat that happens to have your signet ring on it, you forget to pick your finger up and take the ring off, well, you've just lost your signet ring. And when that happens, you would do something like this. You would change this icon so that it's no longer carried. And at some point, that would go away from your inventory once we decide that you are not going to go back for it. You just delete it out of your inventory. But at the same time, let's say you need to go through a river or through a very narrow tunnel or a narrow passage of some kind. Your backpack is on your back, and it's adding too much bulkiness to the ability to pass through it, so you decide to take it off. Well, everything that is now in that backpack automatically comes off. And if you forget to go back to get your backpack or are unable to do it because of maybe that passage collapsed or sealed itself behind you, that kind of thing, or you just simply didn't take it off and then carry it with you while you were going through the passage and you left it behind and couldn't get back to it, then all of those items are no longer available to you. So it's a way of tracking your inventory and make use of role-playing around that particular aspect of as well. Now, in this particular case, everything is carried, so we don't need to worry about that. And then weapons, I tend to ask that, like the Longsword, for example, right hand. So it's a right-handed, or sorry, yeah. Let's go with a scabbard. And then this will be a right-hander. This is what I tend to ask my players to do, is tell me what hand you are making use of that particular sword in. So whether your character is right-handed or left-handed. Or ambidextrous, doesn't matter. But again, this comes back to the, well, you've just lost your right arm. All of a sudden, your longsword is no longer as effective because it's now in your offhand. Those kinds of things. For things like clothes, all I ask is that you say it's warm because you're wearing it. Or if you're just wearing your armor and you're not necessarily wearing these, then you just organize them into your backpack. And that's all you have to do. So it gives you a means of organizing your inventory. Now at the bottom of this, there's also your encumbrance. You'll see right now that we have an encumbrance of 140 pounds. We can carry a maximum of 270 pounds, but we can push, lift, or drag up to 540 pounds. Now if I drop that backpack on the ground again, you'll see that we'll lose the bulk of the weight of the food that we're carrying, or the material that we're carrying. And if I put it back on, that weight returns. Well, don't forget your rations that are in here, they weigh a fair amount, and you have 10 of them. And I should check, yeah, we did get 5 javelins. Okay, so we're good there. You have 10 of them. So as you use these rations up, that weight will slowly drop because you'll be going, oh, I have 10 rations, I'm now at 9 rations, or now I'm at 8 rations, that kind of thing. And a ration represents everything you need, including food and water, to be able to survive for 1 day of food. And that's what that represents. Well, then, some people like to ask, well, what's the purpose of the water skin? Well, that can be a combination of two things. It could be that you're going to convert the water that's in that water skin into holy water. It's a ritual, but it can be done. But at the same time, other players like to make the assumption that that water skin is their daily ration of water. And that's perfectly fine. You can do so. But the assumption is that rations are everything you need in order to survive for that particular day, or to be able to keep fed for that particular day. So that includes your breakfast, that includes your supper, your lunch, etc., and whatever snacks you're going to do. And in my campaigns, it also includes water usage, unless a player has told me they're going to use the water skin as their source of water for that particular day, or for X number of days, depending on how much water or how large that water skin is. Those kinds of things. Now, we are essentially done with our Noble Knight background except for our features, so I'm going to leave that open for the moment. We don't gain any features through the humans, so I'm going to close that, and I'm just going to move this up here for now. Before this character is ready, the only thing we have available to us is our weaponry in the Actions tab. Now, we have 5 javelins, but a javelin can be used both as a melee weapon and as a ranged weapon. So if I throw it, I need to make sure that I tick off that I've thrown that particular weapon. If, however, I just use it as a melee weapon, I don't need to do that. And you'll notice that in both these cases, the same damage and attack roll are used for the bonuses. I'm not too worried about that, and the same is here as well. In relation to the longsword, that is strictly a melee weapon, but it could theoretically be used as an ad hoc ranged weapon, as a weapon of last resort kind of thing. That typically is something that is decided on the fly, so it's not something that needs to be added here. Now, a longsword is also a versatile weapon, which means that you can use it as a two-handed sword rather than just a one-handed sword, which is what the assumption is right now. So, there are a couple of options that you can do in order to set up whether you're using this as a versatile versus, two-handed versus single-handed configuration. But we'll come back to adding the versatile functionality into the Actions tab here in a moment. So the first thing that I want to do is take a look at our abilities. And I'm going to pop each of these open and figure out what is a feature we could theoretically convert into an actionable item. And interesting. All right. And then set it up in our Actions tab here for use. So the first thing I will do is cover off the features we're acquiring through our Noble Knight background. And there actually is a little bit of a glitch here. This retainers feature is an either or, meaning that these two features, you don't get both of them, you get one of them. So if your character has the noble background, you may select this background feature instead of position of privilege. That means that you either take the retainers feature or you take the position of privilege feature. In this particular case, I'm actually going to simply choose the position of privilege, mainly because I really don't want to deal with retainers right now. So I can go and delete that particular item from this page, and it's not going to change any effects on this particular character. So position of privilege essentially allows you to make use of the standing that you have acquired due to your pedigree, essentially. So when you're in a area where there is a local noble, you can essentially secure an audience with that particular noble if you need to, in some way, shape, or form. However, you can also impose upon just a local farmer in the middle of nowhere to provide you accommodations and food for a night or two. And they will do everything that they can to ensure that you are happy as a result of that. How you treat them comes down to being a paladin. So generally, they will allow a paladin into their homes more than they would let a soldier of noble birth into their homes, although they would still allow you in, but they would treat you slightly differently. Knowing that you're a paladin might gain you a few bits of knowledge of the local area, things like that, whereas being a soldier, they might just simply tolerate you. In this particular case, you can also gain access to noble events and whatnot due to your high birth. So, because of the fact that you're treated as that within that sphere of influence, and you'll excuse the stumbling of words there because this is actually a very difficult thing to describe. So, it means that you could potentially impose upon someone to be able to allow you into an event, and potentially either through a bribe, although as a paladin you wouldn't necessarily bribe somebody, but you would still be able to go through and talk your way into that particular event with little effort. So this is where position of privilege comes into play. You can use your privilege to get into places you might otherwise not necessarily gain access to. Additionally, you are also generally assumed that you are permitted to be where you're at. So if you walk into an area that's generally secured, you can make use of your position of privilege capability there and essentially convince them that you're supposed to be there. So that's what that comes down to. It's not something that is actionable, but it is something that you could theoretically role play out, and that the dungeon master could role play out so that you can talk your way into a particular locale or location or event, or work your way into a noble, stuff like that. So that's what that comes down to. And that covers everything we need to discuss around the Noble Knight background. In relation to the features provided by your Paladin class here, I'm going to just scroll this up here so that we see our level here. I'm going to start with lay on hands. And the reason for that is that this is something that is definitely actionable. So you're going to want to throw it into your Actions tab. And the way this works is that it acts as a pool of points. So, and that pool is 5 times your paladin level. And you'll note that it says paladin level. So if you choose to multi-class, let's say as a fighter, but you left your paladin level at 3 and continued to level your fighter class up to, say, 5, and you've now got a total of level 8, your lay on hands pool is only going to be 15 hit points. It is not going to be, sorry, that may be incorrect. Yeah, no, that's right. 5 times your character level, or paladin level. It's not going to be 40 hit points. And the reason for that is it's your paladin level, not your character level. And that's how multi-classing makes things a little bit more complicated. Now, the skill is already set up, so once you drop it into place, you don't really have to do anything, because although they did it a little bit differently. But I suppose that'll work. Theoretically, all they had to do was put a 5 here and then Paladin level, and it would work, not 5 things of that, but in any event, this still does what it's supposed to do. So, how this works is as follows. You have a maximum pool of, in this example, 5 hit points that you can choose from. You can choose to lay on hands up to 5 times, in the sense that you could heal 5 people, 1 hit point each. You can choose to heal someone the full 5 hit points, so meaning that you get to do your lay on hands once. Or you can spread that out a little bit. So you could, say, give someone here 2 hit points, another person 2 hit points, and a third person 1 hit point. It gives you that ability to provide that level of healing. Now, the problem is that with Fantasy Grounds, they're assuming you're just simply going to heal somebody 5 hit points, and in 90% of the cases, that's exactly what's going to happen. If you happen to get to level 3, or level 2 in this particular case, and gain the spellcasting capability and already have Cure Light Wounds in it, you're probably going to lay on hands once and then start casting Cure Light Wounds as your other spells. So that's the reason why Fantasy Grounds sets this up. You could set up your own custom effects here that are heal effects to give you a bit of different numbers to play with that would add up to your total here, but you then have to keep track of how many you've already used. So that sort of comes into a bit of a play here. In any event, no matter whether you use it once or whether you use it 5 times or whatever, you have to keep track of how often you use it, because you do require a rest in order to regain the ability to draw on that power. So let's take a look at just making an adjustment to this. So even though there is no statement that a paladin requires a rest to be able to recover that pool of hit points, the implication is there, and all of the other rule sets state that in order for a paladin to regain the pool that they have available to them, they have to complete a long rest. So you'll want to make sure that you're in the preparation tab here, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. I've encouraged players to adjust this number based on the level that they have done here. And the reason why I say that is because it allows them to track how many times they've actually used the lay on hands thing, or feature rather. But at the same time, these are players that have set up the 1 hit point use or the 2 hit point use, or etc., etc. And they're tracking how many hit points they've actually doled out through the course of a particular day. For anyone who just wants to use lay on hands with the full 5 hit point buffer out there, then you're just going to want to set that to 1. But let's say you do this. You get into a situation where you are going through combat. A party member of yours is knocked out, or they're reduced to 0 hit points. You can place lay on hands on that particular party member, heal them up by 1 hit point. That way they can act more or less as a character that can soak up additional damage while the party works on potentially dealing with the rest of the creatures that they're fighting. And you can do that up to 5 times before that party member can no longer be brought back up to 1 hit point through lay on hands. So it comes down to your playstyle. And this is entirely up to you as to how you want to do that. And that is how you would use lay on hands when it comes to hit point stuff. But lay on hands can also be used to cure diseases, as well as neutralize multiple poisons. And the way this works is, for every point that you wish to expend out of your pool, you can cure a disease or neutralize a poison. So if someone happens to have 3 distinct poisons in their body, you could use 3 pool points and neutralize all 3 of those poisons. Or let's say that a character is hit by a ghoul and then hit by something else that had a different kind of disease and then hit by a third creature that had a different kind of disease and they happen to roll badly and capture that or catch that disease in all three cases. Well, you can then expend 3 hit points, or sorry, the three pull points to neutralize those diseases on that particular character or party member. Unless you have already used 3 points, then you'd only be able to neutralize 2 of them. You'd have to then sleep a day, and then you could neutralize the third one the following day. So that's how this feature works. It's a very complicated feature for what you gain as a paladin, and it does take a little bit of getting used to in order to be able to make use of it. So I'm going to set this as a 1 because this is how most of the players are going to make use of this particular ability. But for those who want to be able to make use of it with multiple uses per day and then set up some additional healing point segments here for that, then I would recommend going through and increasing the total daily use value there so that when a character goes through a long rest, you will gain this particular ability back. And it should be pointed out that this only works on living creatures. It will have zero effect on anything that is undead or constructs, which is a change from the past because it used to be in older editions that you could use lay on hands to actually hurt the undead. That is no longer the case with 5th edition. So just wanted to point that out as well. So Divine Sense is the other feature you gain at level 1. And this is something that you're going to want to track. And I'll explain why here in a moment. So I'm just going to drag and drop this. And I'm actually going to set both of these under the Paladin grouping here. That way there's a group for your Paladin skills so that you know exactly where to go to get it. And the reason why we want to track it is mainly because of this last line here. You can use this feature for a number of times equal to 1 plus your charisma modifier. Well, our charisma modifier in this particular case is 1, so we are going to be able to gain 2 uses of it. So that means we can use this twice before we have to complete a long rest in order to be able to regain the use of it. Now, what does it do? Well, what it does is it gives you the ability to sense anyone who is essentially angelic, celestial, a fiend, or undead within 60 feet and that is not behind complete cover. And what do I mean by that? Well, if someone's behind a building and that is classified as complete cover to you, you won't sense them. But if they are peering around the corner, you will sense them because they have now broken their total cover. They are under 3/4 cover at that point. So it gives you that ability to detect those things. In addition to that, you will also be able to detect items that have been consecrated or desecrated, much like the way that the Hollow spell works. So if you're looking for a particular altar that you have to destroy, you can use this Divine Sense capability and hone in on the object that acts as that altar. So whether it's the pedestal that something is standing on, whether it is the platform that thing is standing on, you'll be able to determine what that is and begin the process of either destroying it or consecrating it in order to, correct a desecration. And that's how that skill actually works. You won't be able to identify exactly who a particular creature is when you've detected them, but you'll at least be able to tell the type. So if there is a celestial creature peering around the corner at you, you will know that they're there if you've used this ability. If there is a fiend that is hidden behind a tree that is only acting as half cover, you will be able to tell you or know that there is a fiend staring at you or looking around the corner at you. And if there is undead coming out of a grave, you will be able to determine that they are in the process of doing so, essentially because you will know that they're undead and their position in the ground would indicate to you that they're digging themselves out. You will be able to tell whether the undead is a zombie whether it is a skeleton or a vampire. You will not be able to narrow it down to whether it is a specifically named vampire or a specifically named zombie, if it happens to be a special zombie of some kind, that kind of thing. Like you wouldn't be able to distinguish an ash zombie versus a standard zombie. You would just know it's a zombie. So you'd be able to determine the type. And that's how that ability works. So the last thing that I want to look at before I actually go through and finish this particular video so that we can look at the leveling in the following video, I want to come back and circle back to this versatile capability. Well, what we can actually do, and I don't know why it's not giving me the ability to, I know why. So they have apparently, I don't want to add a weapon, but I want to add a power. And the reason for that is this just simplifies things for me. So I'm going to go with a longsword here as the power. It's not going to have any specific use, and it's going to be in the weapons. And I don't know if I can actually set this up to work that way. Yeah, no, it's going to set it up down here. That's fine. I'm not too worried about that. Now, the reason why I've done this is I want to be able to add an action, and it's going to be a cast action, but it's going to be an attack. And with a versatile longsword, you're essentially changing the damage type, but you're not changing the attack roll. So right now, the attack roll is going to be a melee attack, but it's going to be based on your, I believe it's your dexterity. Yeah, it's actually, longswords can do both, I think. It doesn't tell me. All right, 1 second here. Base, strength. Yeah, so it's going to be your strength in this particular case. I'm going to set that up as strength, and that gives me the +6 to the attack roll. And there's no bonus here unless you actually have a weapon that gains a bonus. So you'll want to make sure that you make that modification at some point. Now, the damage is another effect. And what that will be is a 1d10 die as opposed to a 1d8 die. And so I'm just going to grab a 1d10. And I'm going to make sure that I add my strength bonus to the damage. And that the type is slashing. Now, it's a little bit of a different way to do this. Some people just create another weapon that's quote-unquote a fake weapon. I don't like doing that because it just looks strange. Setting up this as an actual longsword gives you the ability to essentially switch to a two-handed attack stance in the middle of combat. And you just scroll down to the bottom here and go, okay, I'm going to make an attack. That's a hit, and I'm going to do my damage. And that's all that comes down to. You don't have to worry about changing anything out here, modifying anything, or futzing around with a very weirdly configured weapon here. All you have to do is just deal with this, and it just simplifies things. So with that, this particular paladin is now ready for a campaign. You've got a level 1 paladin fully configured and ready to go. The only thing that remains would be your description stuff. And this is really a role-playing thing, which is generally why I don't tend to cover it inside of the campaign. But I'm focusing on it a little bit because with a paladin, your alignment does come into play to a certain particular aspect of things. And it kind of links directly down into your oath that you're eventually going to take. At the same time, your oath is going to be pretty closely linked to your ideal and your personality. And so this is something that you're going to want, to have defined before you even think of actually putting this character into a campaign. In the sense that you're actually ready and playing through it. Because you're going to need to know in advance what oath you're going to choose, thereby what the ideals are and your bonds are and your personality traits that are going to define that oath, so that everything links up for when you take your holy quest if you're not already starting it at level 1. Your holy quest could be from level 1 to level 3. That could be how long that particular quest lasts. You could theoretically start your your holy quest at level 3, and you would not be able to acquire level 3 until you completed that holy quest. So what that means is that your character is ready to level up to level 3, but the Dungeon Master is holding you back until you complete your holy quest. Those are the kinds of things that make a Paladin great from a role-playing perspective, because there are so many avenues that you as a player and as a Dungeon Master I can take to make sure that you as a player and your character are fully engaged in everything that is going on, and that a Dungeon Master can do the same thing. So this is one of the good things about a Paladin. So you're going to want to make sure that your alignment is fit with the oath that you're going to decide on, as well as these 3 things here: the personality traits, the ideals, and the bonds. Make sure that they are all set up to align with that oath so that your character is fully prepped and ready to go for when you take your holy quest. And as I said in the previous video, that is because it gives me the ability to monitor your character, determine whether you have stuck to your alignment, which should be a goodish alignment, and that you haven't done something to break that oath. Because you break the oath, your alignment shifts. Those two are interlinked when you're a Paladin. If your alignment shifts and it shifts towards evil, by the time you are ready to take your class specialization, I, as the Dungeon Master, will not be letting you take any of those class specializations if your alignment has shifted to evil. You will be taking the Oathbreaker class specialization because you have officially broken your oath, and your character is now evil. Now, that doesn't mean that's the end of your character. It does mean that you have to go through and recreate your character, because you don't gain these same abilities. You gain entirely different features. Sorry. When you take the oaths, you gain these features, but you don't gain anything that comes through any of these particular oaths. Which means that if you're level, say, 6, and you have done something as your character that has shifted that alignment to evil, you're recreating this character with everything the same, with the exception that when you level this particular character up to level 3, you don't take any of these oaths, you take the Oathbreaker oath that comes from the Dungeon Master's Guide. And then you complete the rest of the character build out. Now, what that doesn't mean that I'm resetting your character to level 1. What that means is that you're going to drag the Paladin class here up to level 3, reapply or apply the Oathbreaker thing, and then continue to level your character up until you reach the level that you were already at, and set your hit points to be the same, that kind of thing. So there are a couple of things that you'll want to make sure that you do, and essentially what you do is you create a brand new character, copy everything over, and you're good to go. It's your oaths, the features that come from your oaths that change, so that's what will be different. Everything else will remain the same. But having said all that, that all completes this particular video. So this is part 2 of the Paladin creation process. The next video is going to be leveling the Paladin through from level 1 through to level 20 to show you how to set up all of the various features and what adjustments have to be made as you level that particular character up. So I hope you enjoyed this particular video. I hope you found it informative, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.